which is very dramatic. And I have really never been accused of being dramatic before, so I don't know. It was very unlike me. Well, hello, my beautiful reader friends, and welcome back, or welcome for the first time if you are new here. My name is Lori Beth, and welcome to my little corner of the internet where we get into all of the bookish small talk. I am bringing to you today yet another monthly wrap-up video that I am very far behind on, but better late than never, as they like to say, and we are going to talk about all of the books that I read in the month of February today. So in the month of February, I was really struggling with my reading slump, and oddly enough, I read 6 books in total, but they weren't all hitting for me. I was like grasping at straws through this month to try to find something that was going to like really pull me out of that reading slump, and it was kind of hard for me to want to continue to pick up my books and read, if that makes sense. Nothing was really landing exactly how I wanted it to, but I did end up reading 6 books, so somehow, you know, the horrors persist, and so do I. I don't know how it happened, but here we are. So per usual, I am going to start from the start of the month through the end of the month, so the very first book I read through the last book I read. Then we'll talk about what they were, how I felt about them, and what I rated them, and honestly, I don't know. February was kind of like a blur. It's a weird month here, especially in the Midwest in the United States, where things are just kind of dark and cold and gray, and we're really lacking a lot of sunshine and kind of really just riding the struggle bus a little bit in life in general around that time of year in this specific part of the country, but that's neither here nor there. So because we do have quite a few books to go over per usual, we're gonna go ahead and jump right in. All right, so first up in the month of February, I read Babylonia by Costanza Casati, and this, oddly enough, was a 5-star read for me. Do not be fooled. This was the very beginning of February. This was kind of before I hit that wall that was the month to come that I didn't realize yet, because this book just took my breath away, blew me out of the water. Any kind of term you can think of, this book did it to me. Not only the storyline, but the writing itself. Oh my God, just beautiful and phenomenal. So I figured I'd read the inside cover of this one so I can give you a better synopsis of what the story is about instead of just trying to go off the top of my head. Because I actually really do remember quite a few details of this book, oddly enough, but I want to give you a concise idea of this storyline. So Babylonia, across the centuries, has become the embodiment of lust, excess, and dissolute power. In this world, you had to kill to be king. Or in the case of Semiramis, an orphan raised on the outskirts of the empire. Nothing about Semiramis' upbringing could have foretold her legacy, but when she meets a young representative of the new Assyrian king, a prophecy unfolds before her, one that puts her in the center of a brutal world and in the hearts of 2 men. Caught in the politics and viciousness of ancient Assyria, Semiramis trains in war and diplomacy, and with each move, she rises in rank, embroiled in a game of power, desire, love, and betrayal until she can ascend to the only position that will ever keep her safe. In her second novel, Costanza Casati brilliantly weaves myth and ancient history together to give Semiramis, the only female ruler of the Assyrian Empire, a voice, charting her captivating ascent to a throne no one promised her. I mean, if that doesn't do it for you, I don't know what will. I've talked about it a few times just briefly, but wanted to go into more detail in this wrap up because I knew it was coming. But this very much gave me Game of Thrones, but not quite as intense as Game of Thrones. So I'm not going to lie, I'm a little bit of a baby, mostly like visually. So like TV shows, sometimes I have a hard time watching if they are too intense, too grotesque. But this gave off those vibes without it being quite as edgy, but still very detailed and had that political intrigue behind it. Like that was the main part of the story. And also the love that turns into kind of like a love triangle and betrayal and what people have to do in worlds like this to climb the ladder to get to a safe spot, because it really seems like there is no safe place in an empire like this. So it was just a very brilliantly written story that really did weave together that heavy, heavy historical aspect of things, but with this female character that you were honestly rooting for the whole time. And even when she made some choices that kind of would like make you cringe, you knew she was doing it. Like she was looking out for herself. And it was very kind of awe-inspiring. It was just such a beautifully written story and a true page turner. Like I have not in a minute had that feeling of like, I can't put this book down. Like I need to know what happens. And like a chapter would end on like a semi cliffhanger and I just had to keep reading. So highly recommend if any of those are keywords for you and books that you like, do not sleep on this one. Like do not wait, run tomorrow and pick up this book. And honestly, because of this story, I am very excited to read her other novel. It's already on my TBR. So that will be coming in a future monthly TBR, I am sure. After that, I read Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. I did read this on my Kindle, so I don't have a physical copy of this. And I rated this 4 stars. My second Claire Keegan, who I have already spoken about quite a few times because I'm kind of enthralled by her. I just really love her very hard-hitting books that are kind of small. Like I don't know if she has a book over 200 pages. She might, but this one was only, 118 pages. So quite small, and also had a way to evoke a lot of emotion from me for being so short. So for the synopsis of the story, it is 1985 in a small Irish town. During the weeks leading up to Christmas, Bill Furlong, a coal merchant and family man who was father to 5 girls, faces into his busiest season. Early one morning, while delivering an order to the local convent, Bill makes a discovery which forces him to confront both his past and the complicit silences of a town controlled by the church. Already a bestseller in France and certain to be read worldwide for generations to come, Small Things Like These is a deeply affecting and inspiring story of hope, quiet heroism, and empathy from one of our most critically celebrated and iconic writers. I mean, you heard it right there. Iconic writers. And I really think that Claire Keegan is on that level. This to me would be a classic. This would be a book that if banned books were not so prevalent, especially here in the United States, would be read by young students and probably like middle school, because this just goes into so much of a human nature, human behavior, of what like we do as people when we are kind of forced to see something going on in life and what we would do if we were put in certain situations. The main character in the story is very clearly just a good human, and he is put in a situation where he has to kind of think about what is right and wrong and what he is going to do in that situation. And I think it was very inspiring, very eye-opening, and it almost made me think, like, what would I do in that situation? Like, I hope I would do and handle things the same way that this main character did. It's a story that really delves into a moral dilemma, how acts of courage from people can help solve a situation like that. I don't know. I'm talking a lot about a book that's not that big, but this is what I mean by her stories. They are not long by any sense of the word, and they make you feel and think all of these things. And I love a book like that, a book that you think about well after you've put it down. So this was a 4-star read for me. And again, don't be fooled. I know I said that I was slumping hard in February, and we are getting there. So from there, I read Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. I am so sorry. I am trying my best with that name. It's, again, a very beautiful name that I probably did no justice to. So this is another one I've had on my list for quite a long time. And I don't know, I was like, I just want something different. I want something a little off the wall, a little quirky. And that's kind of what this book is. It's like a murder mystery, but also has to do with animals and the relationship between animals and humans and how that all ties into the murder mystery. And this one I rated 3 stars. So it didn't end up being everything I wanted it to be. To be honest, it kind of got a little dry and a little repetitive towards the middle of the book. It follows a main character that lives in this remote Polish village, and her main job is to take care of properties throughout the village. when it's the off season and the owners of these homes aren't there. She has a few neighbors, but there's a lot of space in between. So it's kind of a small community, but they're also not right on top of each other, just enough to kind of notice the behaviors of each other and what each other are doing. So this main character is known as kind of a recluse, kind of like, I'm going to put this in quotes, old crazy lady, because she's very much into astrology and has like this really deep connection with nature and animals. And she notices that her next door neighbor is hunting and killing animals that she does not see fit for whatever reason he is doing it. She does not think he needs to be doing that. This particular neighbor ends up dead, and she kind of falls into this sleuthing, trying to figure out what happened to this guy, because some of the evidence is leading towards him being attacked by animals. And then as the story goes on, other people in the village start to have bad experiences with animals, or other mysterious things start to happen. So it turns into like this kind of weird whodunit, and she's trying to figure out the whole time what exactly is going on here. And she's very much convinced that the animals are taking revenge on people. And she's kind of like, I told you so. I'm not a crazy lady. So the book was very interesting itself. There are some twists and turns, but I feel like the main twist didn't come until like too far into the book. And then there wasn't that much of the book left. So that left me kind of feeling a little bit like it was too slow in the middle, a little drawn out. And it was almost so off the wall that it was hard to follow at times. So that's kind of a fine line for me. It's like too weird and I don't understand what's going on, or it's like not weird enough and it's not giving me the vibe that I wanted. So it was just okay. Like it was good, not great, if that makes sense. But this is kind of where I started to hit the wall. It got kind of slow. It was hard to pick up and read, and I rated it 3 stars. And then I was like, I need something. I need to go back to my roots. So I reached for a fantasy book, and that was The Songbird and the Heart of Stone by Carissa Broadbent. And I have to read the titles of these books because sidebar. Why are fantasy book titles becoming so long? I can't even remember. There's like so many words. It's like someone somewhere was like, we have to just put words on the book to draw someone. And it's like so many that you can't even keep them in order. And I almost always say them out of order. So sidebar over. This was me going into a little bit of a complaint about how I can't even remember the names of the books that I've read unless I'm physically holding them. But I was really excited to get to this one. This is the 3rd book in the Crowns of Nyaxia series, but the first book in Misha's story. So I'm not going to go into too much detail because I don't want to give spoilers, but there is a character that you meet in the first 2 books that does have her own storyline, and that's where this book goes. First and foremost, the first 2 books in the Crowns of Nyaxia series, impeccable. Loved them so much. Introduced me to Carissa Broadbent's writing, and I have said time and time again how I was kind of blown away that she was on the level of like SJM for me, Jennifer Armentrout. Like I love her fantasy writing. She has very solid like adult fantasy books, and they are also the human vampire trope, which is fun to read in an adult fantasy. Like if you were a Twilight girly, you have been waiting for a book like that since that series. Like, give me more humans, give me more vampires, and put them in storylines together. That's what the first 2 were like. I did enjoy this, but it just wasn't the same. So I was a little bummed because I actually do really like the main character. I was excited to learn more about her and where she came from, kind of like how her backstory is affecting her now as a character. And this one was kind of like an adventure book, and I was excited for that. However, I think because it was mostly, the storyline was like in one setting, like they went to this place to do this adventure to like accomplish this thing. And it I don't know if it made the pacing feel off, if that's what the problem was. I don't know. It just didn't hit the same for me. Also, the main love interest in this, it just wasn't hitting also. Like, it was good, not great. So another instance of good, not great. I rated this 3.75 stars. I don't think I said that. I kind of just went off into an immediate tangent on this story. But yeah, that was hard for me because I don't think I rated the first two books less than at least 4, but I'm going to say 4.5 stars. So again, good, not great. And I was like, well, dang it. How did that happen? Because I was really looking for that thing to pull me out of my reading slump, and wasn't necessarily it. So I went a totally different direction. I was like, maybe instead of going for what you usually like to read, let's go 180. Let's turn it around. Let's find something that you haven't read in a while. That was a thriller. So I picked up my copy of Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney, a stunning book. This is my book of the month edition. I don't know if the book at the bookstore has this, but it's got this really beautiful, like silvery shift on it, which I'm not going to lie. And just like the background itself was really pretty to look at. Like every time I would pick up the book, when it was like on the couch next to me, I was like, God, this is so pretty. I really like I'm like loving these vibes. Like I like the colors, the perfect little shift on the cover. And I also really enjoyed Alice Feeney's last novel that I read. So I was like, let's give this one a go. I ended up rating this one 3 stars. And I know what you're probably thinking, like, wow, this isn't really that bad of a month. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but 3 stars for me is not really that great of a rating. It's really just mid. Like, I was looking for things that were hitting. So when I had another 3 stars on my hand, I was like, wow, I'm never going to find a book that I love again. That's how desperate I start to feel in those situations, which is very dramatic. And I have really never been accused of being dramatic before, so I don't know. It was very unlike me. But anyways, let's read the synopsis of this one together so we can kind of go into my thoughts and feelings on it. Author Grady Green is having the worst best day of his life. He calls his wife Abby to share some exciting news as she is driving home. He hears Abby slam on the brakes when she sees something on the road ahead. Over Grady's protests, Abby gets out of the car. When he eventually finds her car by the cliff edge, the headlights are on, the driver's door is open, her phone is still there, but his wife has disappeared. A year later, Grady is still overcome with grief and desperate to know what happened to Abby. He can't sleep and he can't write, so he travels to a tiny, remote Scottish island to try to get his life back on track, and then he sees the impossible, a woman who looks exactly like his missing wife. So again, I was like, this is totally different. Like, I don't read thrillers that often. I do like them, but I have to have a decent amount of space in between the time that I read them. And I knew that I liked Alice Feeney's last book, and it had a very similar setting where she likes this very like isolated, remote Scottish atmosphere. And I am here for it. I love that. I want to read about people that are kind of going crazy on a tiny Scottish island, which that's what this book vibe kind of gave me from the synopsis. And it was kind of that, but it wasn't very thrilling and it wasn't very exciting. So mostly when I was reading it, it just felt kind of blah, a little boring almost. And it was one that I kind of guessed what was happening like before the big plot twist came. And that's always a really big bummer for me. Again, I keep reverting back to the first book I read by her, and it was actually the opposite. Like, she was able to take me by surprise. So I think I was like, maybe I set my expectations way too high because that first one just like totally blew me out of the water. And this one, not so much. Again, it was good, not great. It was just okay. So that was unfortunately my experience with Beautiful Ugly. Again, really like the vibes, I like the atmosphere. I enjoy that setting. I like that she is clearly an author that uses that kind of seclusion, like where characters are secluded somewhere. I think that builds a lot of tension itself in a story. So I do appreciate that about her story so far. This one just fell a little bit flat for me. And again, when you kind of learn the plot twist before it happens, it just kind of like takes like all the air that's left in the balloon. So finally, I felt like I was at my wit's end, and I was like, you need to figure this out, Lori. You need to figure this out. So what are we going to do about this? So I took my little behind to the bookstore and started walking around, and I made myself pick up as many books that seemed interesting to me, even if it was just by the cover, read a couple of pages of each, and just like went with the vibe. Like I needed to just go based off of what a book was telling me by the first few pages. Like I needed to be inspired by something, and leave it to none other than Emily Henry to finally pull me out of my reading slump. She can do it every time. And another reason she's kind of like a rainy day author for me, because she is always there in my time of need. And I finally read Funny Story, and I rated it 4.5 stars. So not only is this book set in my home state, it is set or based off of one of my favorite cities in the entire state. And I'm actually traveling back to the city in a week with my husband. I have a vlog from the city from last year. I'll link that somewhere in the video, because if you've read this and you want some like visual aids of what it actually looks like, go back and look at that vlog, because it was so spot on that this book did something to me. It like changed my brain chemistry, because I was able to connect so deeply to the setting, and it made me really fall in love with the characters as well. So this one was also just super fun because of the tropes that were involved as well. Something a little different than what I've read before. And if anybody can do it, it's Emily Henry. So we follow a main character named Daphne, who is engaged to someone who moves her to this city where he grew up. And here in the city where he grew up are all of his friends and family, including his best friend, who just happens to be a female. Daphne's cool. Daphne has like already totally accepted that him and this woman have been best friends for life, and there's nothing weird about it, and it's totally okay that she's in the bridal party on his side. Nothing to worry about until there's something to worry about. So he does end up leaving her for this woman, and now she's left in the city where she knows no one, doesn't know where to go, where to live. So she ends up moving in with her ex-fiance's new girlfriend's ex-boyfriend. Yes, that's exactly how this story starts. So that's not a spoiler. This is very much made clear that this is what is happening in the story. But you can very much see that this is a story full of complexities because of the relationships between these people and kind of the betrayal that our main character goes through, and how our main character finds her footing in this unknown place, in this new job with these people she doesn't know, and kind of really just starts to learn a lot about herself and stand on her own 2 feet. It was absolutely beautiful, so heartwarming. The male main character in this book is probably one of the most realistic main characters I've read. Daphne as well. So the female main character was also just they just felt real. They felt normal. And I think that's why I've always appreciated Emily Henry's contemporary romance books, because they do feel like very genuine characters usually when I'm reading about them. But these two, I think, maybe take the cake for me. Not to mention, Daphne is also a librarian, and she's working as a children's librarian in this seaside town in Michigan. And it's just so full of vibes. It's so full of all the things you love. Beautiful atmosphere. A lovely main character who works at a library and teaches children to love books. It's like, say less. There's no more that I need in a book than this. And of course, just watching the character development was really fun. They were great characters. And again, Emily Henry just has a way of writing characters that feel so real that it's almost like you're not even reading a story. I don't know. It was very heartwarming. I really liked the tropes in this. And again, that connection, like that personal connection I've never had in a book before, like actually being from a place that I foresee myself living one day, that I've been to year after year, took me so far out of my reading slump that I should probably personally write Emily Henry a letter and thank her for keeping my passion for reading alive. Well, there you have it, my friends. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of February, which was such a wild ride for me. Looking back, again, I can't believe that I actually was able to read 6 books because I felt like I was on a roller coaster the whole time. Definitely had a few hits in there, kind of more like a bookend of the month, right? Like I started with that 5-star read, ended with a 5-star read, and then everything in the middle was kind of like touch and go for a minute. And honestly, just really made me question everything in my life because I was like, will I get to a book again that I love? But here we are, not just surviving, but also thriving in this beautiful new month. As always, I would love to know if you read any of the books that we talked about in today's video. What were your thoughts and opinions on those books? Or how has your reading been this year? Let's talk about it. Have you had some really good hits? Have you been struggling with any reading slumps? If you have, don't forget to check out my video about how to get yourself out of a reading slump. I will link that down below as well. But let me know how your reading's going. As always, if you liked this video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button because it always helps a girl out. And if you want to make sure you don't miss any of my other upcoming videos, go ahead and hit that subscribe button too. And of course, it has been an absolute blast, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next one.